Carl is dead. The entire movie is about him moving into the afterlife, and Russell is an angel.
Ask about Illuminati, since the charting of Beatles. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Occult Disney, we go from real to real. Occult Disney, Bohemian Grove and no more real. Occult Disney, ask about Illuminati. Occult Disney, we teach occult to everybody. Occult Disney, the wish upon a star. Occult Disney, you know not to travel far. Oh, Occult Disney, the new brand Pinocchio. Yeah, yeah. Occult Disney, it's above so below. Occult Disney, please enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Occult Disney podcast, where we're getting up to looking into some Disney films for their secrets and mysteries inside. Today's movie is Old Man Carl Flies His House into the Sky. That actually is the Japanese title, by the way. The Japanese title's really long.
It loses a little bit, although it was actually hard to find some of the research because just searching for the word up online is a little bit of a disaster.
You do Up 2008. That's kind of, I guess that tends to help. And if you type movie, you'll get a little more. But yeah, it is kind of, or you get the Peter Gabriel album, that might come up as well. I'm going to, like, every time I use that word, I'm just going to accentuate it today, I guess.
I hope you don't, but I understand if you do.
Well, I just did two, and I didn't do it, intentionally. It just happened, so I can't promise anything. But yes, it is what the Westerners know as Up. By the way, one of the reasons that the transliterated movie titles are so strange a lot of the time, are you familiar with transliterating movie titles?
Specifically, no.
The most fun are, maybe it was Hong Kong, but Schwarzenegger films. I think he's the devil or something. Kindergarten Cop, and I don't remember, somewhere in China, but it was transliterated to Devil King of Children. And then True Lies just becomes like Devil True Lies, like Schwarzenegger is the devil to them or something. I don't get it. So, but yeah, Devil King of Children is great. While I'm tangenting, we were backing an Indian musician at a local festival in Athens, Georgia, and we gave him jokey names as a joke, right? But since English wasn't his first language, he introduced everyone with the messed up names. I don't remember what mine was, but our bass player was Devin, so he introduced him as Devin, King of Children, in front of a couple hundred people. So yeah, be careful when you are playing snarky jokes as a early 20-something guy. But we're getting older and younger for Up, of course. Old Man Carl, 78, I guess. What's your guess? How old is he? Older? You want to go older?
I'll say it's 76.
Okay.
He looked old. Even in his younger photos, he looked like he was already an old man. Even as a baby, he looked like an old man. Right.
Well, that's part of the design. He's one of the more caricatured designs for a character that they've done in Pixar. Yeah, I mean, there are those guys that just look old. Like, what was my buddy was telling me about a movie he just watched. It was John Lithgow and someone else, but they're old men in a retirement home. You're like, well, they looked old when they were in 1980. So what are we doing here? Richard Dreyfuss, he always looked like an old guy.
Walter Matthau.
Yeah. Like Jaws, Richard Dreyfuss is only something like 28 in that movie, but he already looks like 50.
The entire cast of Cheers.
Okay, there we go. Watching Up though last night, I did start to feel old because we've had a long winter here, and I've been having lots of cracking bones as I'm getting old. So just in the past few months, it's like winter's finally getting to me. I'm like, crap. Maybe we'll see an acupuncturist about it. There we go. My foot just cracked. I'm cracking all over. How cracky are you?
I mean, you hear noises as you get into your 40s that you don't remember hearing in your 20s, for sure.
Yeah. But after 35 years of playing music, my thumbs are starting to crack all the time. It's crazy. So
I had to
I
make a
sympathize with Carl more. I sympathize with Carl more than I did the first time I watched this. Let's put it that way.
I had to make a very conscious decision between if I wanted to keep playing keyboard and how serious I was about it, because if I would play keyboard, like, piano for more than 2 or 3 hours a day, because I just inherited some horrible posture that I literally lost the use of my wrists for almost 2.5 months. And it kind of just almost destroyed my livelihood. Like, I could have lost my job over not being able to be efficient, animating on the computer, just because I played like 4 hours of piano the night before. So I learned that the hard way. And yes, and that was definitely into my 30s, I think.
Okay, then yeah, hitting 46 and having that happen, I guess, isn't quite as bad, but it is annoying, and I'm currently having that issue. So again, watching it, I was like, especially when it gets out of bed and you hear 3 cracks. I'm like, crap, that's starting to happen here.
Well, even the fight scene is kind of they take the steam out of the big climax where both old men, their backs just go out, and that's the conclusion of the fight scene.
That's great, though. I mean, because Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, I like that movie more than most people, but man, Harrison's too old to do that. Sorry. He's not too old to be a Red Hawk. I enjoyed that, but he's too old to do Indiana Jones, I think.
What about Tom Cruise Mission Impossible?
Well, the next one is supposed to be the last one. He's right on the line. It's kind of like Roger Moore Bond films, It's like the last couple, you're like, they got to go to the next guy, and they just didn't go to the next guy. I think the last one, Roger Moore, looked reasonably Bondish and was probably Moonraker, Octopussy's looking a little old.
So he was 57 when he did his last Bond movie, View to Kill.
Yeah,
Tom Cruise is 62. Tom Cruise has already got 5 years on him, and he's still working on more.
Yeah, but Ethan Hunt seems like kind of a that is Tom Cruise's character. Well, again, Indiana Jones is Harrison Ford's character, but Harrison Ford is also 82 or something now. So, we'll see. I don't know. Cruise is aging pretty well, I guess. So, well, I'm sure there's some. I'm sure having a big bucket of cash in your backyard helps. That's how he keeps the money.
Well, it's the going clear. It's getting to OTA. I think that's really what's making it happen. More, the money is what allows you to get to OTA, but getting to OTA is what keeps you young perpetually. And he's even older than the character he plays in Mission Impossible, because the character he plays in Mission Impossible, Ethan Hunt, was born in 1964, making him 60 versus Tom Cruise actual age 62. So
stealing a couple years there. Okay. Is he still the poster boy for the Thetans and stuff? I feel like he's distanced himself in the past 10 years without cutting off his ties. I don't know. It's kind of weird how that works.
I think it might be the other way around, but no, I believe that he's still pretty much a poster boy, just not the poster boy, because again, he's 62. And Scientology likes to appeal to a slightly younger demographic than the 62-year-olds.
Yeah, I guess that's it. They're maybe targeting people in their 30s. What? I don't really know.
Hollywood version, because they also have a headquarters in Clearwater, Florida, which does skew a little bit older demographically.
So maybe if you go there, you will find Cruise on a few posters.
Right. That would make the most sense is he just changes home base to Clearwater once he gets, I don't know, 85, 95. How old is he going to push it?
So what is your history with the movie Up?
Carl is dead. The entire movie is about him moving into the afterlife, and Russell is an angel. There it is. We'll see you guys.
I had a feeling you were going to come out with Carl is dead at some point. So maybe that is not the most unobvious thing. Not the most unobvious. Think about that as I said it. I don't remember if I saw this in a theater or not. It's 2008. I'm not quite sure. It does say it's the first 3D Pixar to hit the theater. So that would have been a selling point, but I'm not quite sure where I was in my life when this came out. So
I think I did see this one in theaters because I was working at Disney this time. This is like right in the middle of my career at Disney. I think like 3 years in, and our owner essentially was fascinated with 3D in movies. So when Avatar came out, we all got to go and see Avatar on, company, like just in the middle of a day. And when Up came out, we all got to go to the theater and watch this in 3D too, like right there at downtown Disney.
Okay, this came out in May, so maybe it was kind of like prime the pump for Avatar a little bit, because that's where that's why I guess why your boss was taking that, because those are the two movies where 3D really got cracking, and what the trend lasted till 2014, 2015. When did people stop caring if something was in 3D or not? Now they want the 4DX experience, right?
We talked about this when we did not Scrooged, the Christmas Carol, because I'm pretty sure I went to see Harry Potter in 3D at first, and then they had an awesome trailer for Christmas Carol that was also in 3D. So that kind of secured me in. But Harry Potter, I didn't realize it was just the first 15 minutes or so that were in 3D. So we're there in the 3D theater, everyone's wearing the glasses, and it just stops in the middle of the movie, 15 minutes in, and says, "That is the end of the 3D portion of this movie. Please remove your glasses." It was the most jarring, just black screen with text. And for me, that was the day 3D in the theater absolutely died. There was no coming back from that, because I guess I realized at that point how much of a gimmick it really was. Versus if you went and saw Avatar in 3D, it didn't impress me the same way it impressed everyone else. Our boss, I remember him turning to us and saying, "Well, boys, everything's changed," or something to that effect. Like the entire landscape of movies has just changed forever, and we were here to experience it. And it lasted, like you just said, until about 2014. It lasted 6 or 7 years.
I just read the Imagineering story book, which is very much like the official, making Disney mostly sound good sort of thing. But one of the funny things is, because of that, when they're talking about building Avatar Land, as it's called, and Animal Kingdom, every time they mentioned it, even if they had to mention it a few times in a paragraph, it was Pandora, the world of Avatar. Every time it has to be Pandora, the world of Avatar. They have to say the complete name. Grammatically, it starts to make sense, because then they start mentioning Pandora as a place. So you have to make the distinction between the land and the Animal Kingdom and the place in the movie. So same thing happens there, like Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, but now it's just Star Wars, right? So it was a weird corporate read at that point in the book. Let's put it that way.
They're trying not to get Xeroxed.
Yeah. It was just fine. Like some promotional things. I remember a few years ago there was like something about Disney weddings, and they have the couples talking, and every attraction in place. It's clear that someone at corporate has told them to say the complete name every time, so their speech just sounds unnatural and weird.
That's Disney in a nutshell, actually.
I guess. Oh, especially modern, fully corporate. Like, okay, make sure you got, the people come out right before. Okay, make sure you say this, and this way.
You know what it is? The rhetoric that Disney is able to achieve, though, is really surpassed by no other company that I'm even aware of on this planet. Disney can release the most corporate sounding response to anything. And if they put the right person behind it, singing and dancing, it just feels so official. Versus that same corpo speak, you hear it from almost any other source, and it's so obvious that you're being manipulated. And I don't know what it is about Disney. Maybe it's the magic, but they're able to kind of push that corpo speak directly into your skull in a way that your body doesn't try immediately reject it. You have to consciously reject it.
Well, they own the word magic. That's what the cruise line is for, I guess. Is that what it is? Once they have built a massive cruise ship, they own the word. So words that Disney now owns: what? Magic, wonder, dream, fantasy, wish, and treasure.
I like it. They own so much of the real estate inside of our brains. Now they're just moving in on ambiguous terms that can apply to everything in life, and we're not going to be allowed to say them pretty soon without paying a fee.
Let's place bets on what the next cruise ship is for Disney. I'm going to go with story. That's another word they overuse. Story. Okay.
I think you're onto something here.
That's why I'm saying it, man. I am cruise ships with no casinos. I don't know. Have you ever taken a cruise?
Ironically, I've taken cruises before. I haven't gone on a Disney boat for my own cruise. I tried sneaking one of those in, but I didn't get to set the terms in some of the projects. But I did work on some interactive portholes for the Magic, I think it was, or it might have been the Dream. It might have been the Dream. But a lot of the inside room cabins, the ones that are typically just black closets that have no, like opening to the outside world, they put virtual portholes to make it feel like you did have this outside cabin. But anyways, one of the interesting things about Disney Cruise Lines is you would think that there's kids running all over the place. Like, oh, I don't want to go on a kids cruise. But really, they have the ships designed in a way that the adults never actually have to see their kids because the kids are fully occupied and all of the programs are assigned to very specific levels and sides of the boat made so that they don't exactly intersect with the adults versus every other cruise line out there. Usually the kid programs just take place in whatever room is not currently being used by a convention or whatever. It's sort of secondary. The Disney Cruise Line, it was built into the entire fabric of how they do things. And isn't this the perfect recipe for Disney proxy? You get on the Disney cruise line, and immediately the kids are separated from their parents, and
your parents vanish, and we have
Right.
things for you to do.
Now it's happening in the physical world.
I've never done a cruise. Yeah, like I guess if I were going to target one, I want to go for the Star Trek cruise because I'm a Trekkie dork. But yeah. That's the one that fascinates me. These weird themed cruises where they will just spend massive amounts of money and just kind of convert the ship for like 5 days. Like
Blues Cruise, Metal Cruise, and there was even supposed to be a conspiracy cruise.
Ooh.
However, long story short, it was run by the guy that did Conspiracy Con, which I believe was a West Coast thing. I think they ran it out of California for a few years. And when he tried and do a conspiracy cruise, he got scammed out of all of his money in the process of setting this conspiracy cruise up, and wrote this whole article on his site about there was a conspiracy within the conspiracy cruise planning committee. It was so meta and it destroyed. And Conspiracy Con has not existed ever since that happened. So yeah, the themed cruises are particularly weird.
Of course, today is A Cruise into the Sky. Up's another one with one of those weird production histories. I don't think it was quite passing the ball from one person to another as much, or at least without, in a way that made it sound like they were burning people. But there was something I wanted to read about the original plot for this. Here we go. The initial version featured a floating city on an alien planet populated with Muppet-like creatures, with two brothers vying to inherit their father's kingdom. And when the brothers fell to Earth, they encountered a tall bird who helped them understand each other. That was the original story, and somehow we got to this. That's amazing.
Yeah, isn't that the movie that we just watched? I don't know what you saw. That sounds exactly.
Tall bird checks out to me. But let's see. Yeah, Pete Docter. Oh, here we go. The original name was Heliums. Maybe the aliens were helium. Or I guess that's the balloons. I don't know. It gets confusing with that original concept. But
you got to start. Yeah. Someone had to throw a pickle at a wall at some point.
Pete Docter's the director. Not spelled a little different than your family doctor. Docter, which is kind of confusing. Apparently, this is one of the last films that had some advice coming from some of the 9 old men who all died before the film's release, and thus the film was dedicated to them. So I don't know. There's a little interesting plot point, I guess. But yeah, it is to a point where somewhere it changes. It's now just this old guy going into the sky. And at one point, it was like his wife is in the sky. She's in heaven. So once he's in the air, that's like kind of that was his goal. They had to come up with the whole South America thing, because otherwise you're like, well, now it's just this kind of a strange suicide movie, right? So they're like, we can't do that. So they come up with the whole Venezuela thing. So
I actually like this movie in particular, Up, because I almost feel, this might be a weird analogy, but this movie kind of feels like a Truman Show in a way that Truman gets to the very edge of his world and realizes there's a staircase going up into a door, that he's been living in this fabricated environment, and he just found the bounds of that fabricated environment. And with Up, just like you mentioned, I feel that there's so many seams, there's so many like staircases going to a weird door that you're not supposed to go through, that this movie reveals, because it breaks mold from so many of the other motifs and tropes and archetypes that we're used to seeing with Disney. For example, in my mind, this movie is clearly targeted at a much older demographic. This is not going, or at least the story doesn't have as much to relate to a 6-year-old boy or a girl, or a 9-year-old boy or a girl. If you're older, the older you are, the more you can appreciate this movie. I'll give you one other example, that it can't just be an old guy that floats up into the air, ... and then he commits suicide, because that's sort of morbid. The same way that if you notice, the dogs in this movie can talk. It's a weird Disney movie, but of course, humans have to be able to talk directly to nature, right? Except for the bird. The bird, I believe, is the only animal in this movie that doesn't get to talk to humans. And the reason, if you think about it, it's because all that bird would be saying is, please don't kill me. Let me return to my children. Help it, stop. You're hurting me. You're killing me. Like, these would be the things that the bird would be communicating. And to me, that felt like another one of those bounds. Like, oh, why is the bird the only thing that's not speaking in English? Because that's what the bird would be saying. And then I'm feeling around the wall. Like I'm Truman and I just found like a door somewhere.
Yeah, of course, let's keep in mind that the dogs do have this weird, like, 30s technology to allow them to talk. And
my point stands, humans talk directly to the animal. And without those collars, then they can't talk to the animals anymore.
Yeah, that's where I'm adding in the technological edge, which might be part of the Pixar thing. You're mentioning that this is skewed upwards. Oh, God damn it, I did it again. I didn't even mean to do it. It just came out that way. Where was I going? Yes, this is where Pixar is kind of like, maybe we need to carve out our own little niche because we might need to be our own company. This is the last of those movies. So after this, Pixar is going to just slam directly into Toy Story 3, Cars 2, because now they're in the fold and they need to, make some buck, right? Where Up was quite successful, but it is the last one where it's, like you said, a 6-year-old boy's probably not going to appeal to this so much. So who are we targeting? We're not going for all 4 quadrants to make all the money,
Right. And not to say that people weren't bringing their kids to this movie and that the kids weren't enjoying it. Clearly they were. It was, it's a Disney Pixar movie, but how many kids are showing up to McDonald's and pushing each other over to get the Carl toy, right? I think that that's sort of part of this, versus some of the other characters are just immediately commercial. Carl is maybe one of the least commercial characters, unless, again, you're slightly older and you just have a really direct connection. I would actually be concerned if you had a kid and their favorite Disney character was Carl from Up. That would kind of freak me out a little bit.
So it makes me think of the Upright Citizens Brigade, where they have a sketch where the kid is obsessed with Tuvok from Star Trek Voyager, right? Which you're like, what? Why? So yeah, I guess that'd be the same thing with Carl. It's funny how they decided, like, they don't want him to be repellent. They don't want you to think about, I don't know what they want you to think about, but it said they did not give him liver spots. They did not give him hair in the ears because they thought those things would be repellent. So he's just got the wrinkles and the hearing aid and the cane. They're like, okay, that'll make him old and we'll skip a few of the more unpleasant parts.
What's kind of funny about that is at some point, someone in a room said, we can't give him liver spots or hair in his ear because it'll be repellent. And then someone immediately said, let's have him assault somebody in the head and draw blood.
Yeah, this is another, we're just talking about how you didn't see blood in Disney movies, but Bolt had a little bit, was it? And no, you didn't quite see it in Bolt, though, did you? But here, yeah, he's clearly got a beaner on his head there.
It was mentioned in Bolt. He said that he saw blood coming out of his paw.
We didn't see it,
correct. So this movie, I feel like we need to make like a special list of Disney movies that you see blood in. This is one of the movies. And not only do you see blood, but the blood is created from the main character, the main good guy, assaulting somebody in the head that was really innocent. They didn't even do anything that would have warranted being assaulted. Hence, Carl ends up going to court, declared a public menace, and being forced into an assisted living center.
Right. I guess that's how these things snowball, though, huh? But yeah, we'll call that the Disney blood pact when we find blood in movies.
Okay. Carl has just entered the Disney blood pact. Welcome, Carl.
Carl and the Disney blood pact. That'd be a good name for this movie. Sure. Something else, just looking at the production-y stuff, is the kid who is since retired from acting. So I guess he basically did this. I don't know. I've heard people say maybe for child acting, if you do one really good movie, now you have to stop until you're 18, you know? So maybe that's what this kid did. But I'm reading, it's like the same as the Short Round story from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where it's like, well, he just came with his brother to the audition, and then he was all chatty, and they were like, actually, we like this guy, and so he didn't show up to audition. But it's like, that's the same as the Short Round story, which is kind of weird, you know?
What's the Short Round story?
Just that the actor, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, even though I feel like I should be able to, but like he wasn't going to the audition. He just showed up with his brother, and then the producers noticed him and were like, hey, that's the guy. And then Up has the same story with the kid voicing Russell. So it's a weird repeated story, you know?
They can just sense that there's that untapped quality about it, in which, again, this is what makes Disney casting a little bit creepy.
Yeah. Also, I had a few minutes before we started this recording, and so I was looking at cluster ballooning, because it is like, come on, he's not going to be able to lift his house up with all those balloons. That's insane, which it is, but there actually is a sport called cluster ballooning. Are you familiar with this at all?
No, tell me more. Cluster ballooning.
Unlike traditional hot air balloons, where a single large balloon is equipped with vents enabling altitude control, cluster balloons are multiple, small, readily available, and individually sealed balloons. So in cluster balloons, it's just a pilot in a harness, right? And there's a picture of someone with like 32 rather large balloons. In this case, the balloons are like bigger than you. But
okay, I've seen one of these, and they'll strap them to a lawn chair or something, and now you're floating. Or at least that's the redneck version that I've seen.
Yeah. Old Orchard Beach in Maine does it. Okay, that I used to live near there.
I'm almost positive I've seen one of those redneck YouTube videos where someone does this in a lawn chair and somebody else takes out the balloons with a shotgun at a alarmingly, far away distance.
Okay, that's the redneck version, because the system that Carl uses, where he's snapping a few off here and there, that actually is how they go about it. Like on the harness, they'll cut a few when they want to descend. Of course, the helium runs out, so they descend a little bit that way. And it originates from 1937, which kind of fits in with the timeline of this movie,
Logistically, it's nonsense. The entire concept of this in this movie is not. And someone did the math. I found an article where they basically equated out the exact amount of volume that you would need for helium in order to raise this house into the air, and it would have been something around 6,800 canisters of helium, which would have amounted to about $800,000 at the time that this movie was shot. And the most damning part that this couldn't have happened is that the amount of time it would take to fill up the amount of balloons you would need out of 6,500 canisters would have been something like 30 to 50 hours of time, yet he does it overnight. So there's a time constraint here that it doesn't match. However, yeah, it's theoretically possible, but in this movie, we abandon almost all logic the second that this building starts to raise up into the sky. Or maybe even earlier, because it shows that he's a balloon salesman, and he's, walking around with his balloon, and he adds another balloon to the top, and then the whole thing starts floating up. But that doesn't make any sense, because it was connected to the helium canister. Like, the canister itself was also on the cart, which means that it wouldn't matter. Like, you can't fill up a balloon, and now that balloon somehow defies gravity more than the helium that's in the metal canister if they're connected to the same thing. This isn't going to be a physics lesson, but anyways, Earth is flat. I think that's where I was going to go to. Proof that the Earth is flat, unequivocal.
Right. What was that? Oh, yeah. Carl's a balloon man, right? He has the connections. So he had a whole bunch of friends help him.
Right. The logistics on how he could have done it and the possibility, there wasn't enough time unless he also got half of the city to help him fill up balloons overnight.
He broke into the balloon warehouse, the helium warehouse, you know?
Okay.
Had a whole bunch of help because the city was like, you're not a public menace. So they helped him with the balloons, right? That's what the one lady says. How can you be a public
Someone
menace?
contact Doge. I feel like the Department of Government Efficiency needs to know that they're helping old people acquire helium in the middle of the night.
They're helping, yes. Hey, where was I? I had a thought there. Oh, yes. We have to discuss the first few minutes of this movie, which is kind of a make or break because a lot of people, I think the people that don't like this movie feel so manipulated by the first 10 minutes that they just cannot go in with the rest. Other
Really?
people consider that like kind of so perfect that once the movie is just like running around with talking dogs in the jungle, they're kind of out, you know? I like this movie. Actually, I watched it last night and I was like, oh, this is as good as I remember, which I told you I did not have that feeling with Wall-E, right? Ratatouille held up pretty well. So it was kind of nice that this period of Pixar actually did hold up because after watching a few, I was like, this is as good as I remember. But I like it. But I do sometimes hear some weird, like, I guess the fact that this movie is emotionally manipulative right out affects people.
100%. Again, I think this goes to my case that this movie shows you the seams and the boundaries of where Disney's willing to go through Pixar, and maybe Pixar doing this in a way to help separate themselves. Like you said, it was all for naught because they immediately just go into the blockbuster franchises and start churning out money. Pixar turns into a money printer after Up, essentially, or at least a theoretical money printer.
And this was the sixth highest grossing film of 2009, so this was no slouch either. Now, was it making, Frozen's not Pixar, but was it making Toy Story 3 money? Not quite, but it definitely was. Nobody was taking a bath on this one financially, you know?
Well, imagine a slightly more mundane version of this movie in a pitch meeting. Hey guys, I got this idea. It's about we watch an old dude, like they save up for money and keep breaking their bones and have to spend all their money and they can never go on vacation. And right when they're about to go on vacation, the wife dies. And then the movie starts. This doesn't
the bucket list.
Like,
I haven't
right.
seen the bucket list, but I feel like that might be the bucket list.
The premise of this movie doesn't fit into any category of Disney movie that I can even come up with. At least out of all the ones we've seen so far, it sort of stands out in a really strange kind of like asterisk way.
I guess it Disney proxies the audience a little bit by being so emotionally manipulative from the outset. Now, in 2009, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, it's like grounded in harsh reality. And then the movie becomes fantastical as they go into the sky, which could also be dying, as you mentioned. But
and also it references Russell, the kid. He is not an orphan necessarily, but his parents are divorced and his dad is with some hussy named Phyllis, and Phyllis doesn't like it when Russell is taking attention away from her, and the dad, I guess, is okay with that. The dad is all in on Phyllis and ignoring his child. So there's another even deeper connection here where this old guy is taking this young Asian kid under his wing that has basically been abandoned by his parents, but he is blissfully either unaware of this or he has suppressed it so deep and so down that eventually it's going to come back up and he's going to murder people later in life.
Right. You almost stressed the word, but not quite. That was kind of fun. That is. Yeah, because we do see the mom at the very end clapping, but she's very distant. She's kind of she's by herself, isn't she, as he's getting the merit badge?
They don't make this obvious, by the way. There is a documentary included on the Blu-ray for Up that goes a little bit into Russell's backstory, which is where they tell you that his parents are divorced and that his dad's new girlfriend's name is Phyllis. And that's what I had to know because it never brings it up again. He mentions, hey, where's your dad? Oh yeah, me and my dad used to go and get ice cream, but we don't do that as much anymore. And now when I try and call my dad and Phyllis answers the phone, she tells me that I'm taking too much time away from her or something. And that's the end of it. You never really hear this expanded on. So that's the backstory. His parents are actually divorced and they just kind of sneak. And I guess anyone that is actually going through this dynamic, watching this movie or had gone through it, is relating to this. in a very subtle way because they don't really telegraph it the same as you're used to in Disney movies.
Yeah, it's funny because as you're saying that, I was like, yeah, of course. I was like, did they say that specifically? So yeah, coming from the future, but I guess that's kind of nice where it's just baked into the movie enough where they don't really have to explain it to you, which that's kind of nice. That's showing, not telling.
Well, it made me think there was a Clint Eastwood movie where he also sort of takes an Asian kid under his wing. He's a way more racist than Carl is.
Gran Torino, is it? Yeah,
yes, Gran Torino. This is basically Gran Torino in the sky.
I think
made by Pixar.
It's almost the same vintage, I believe. Gran Torino came out maybe a year before. Time is just, time starts to become time becomes a loop. Torino. That movie is from 2008, 1 year before this. So I guess
when AI gets good enough, this is going to be one of my first projects that I give it. I'm going to say, watch Gran Torino, and then give me the result.
That could be pretty fun. I mean, Ed Asner, who voices Carl, is of course a notorious grump. So great voice casting there. Christopher Plummer is the bad guy, the aged adventurer, which
Months.
I always like. Yes, Months. There we go. So it's always exciting when Plummer shows up, especially when old man Plummer just gets to do the voice work. I guess that's nice.
Any notable dog voices?
Let's see who did the dog. I think that was basically the end of doing that's the voice cast. The kid, Ed Asner, Christopher Plummer. There aren't many characters in this, are there?
There's a lot of dogs, though. There's a lot of dogs in this movie.
Robert Peterson, who's the other director of the film, did Doug the dog. D-U-G. Hey, I didn't catch that. I always thought it was D-O-U-G. So the dog pun's like right there, and I never picked up on it.
See, and I watch all these with subtitles regardless, so I was keen to this one.
No, I didn't have subtitles. I did the other one where I watched on my computer, even though the disc is right there.
Another interesting note on the subtitles on this, there's a scene right after Carl, and maybe I should do a quick little synopsis in case people haven't seen it or need to get caught back up. This is a good time for that?
She feels like it.
So, Up is a movie about, it starts out as this young kid is fascinated with an explorer named Muntz, and Muntz is going all over the world, and he gets in this big Zeppelin called the Spirit of Adventure. Kind of gives me a little bit of Charles Lindbergh vibes, but a Zeppelin version of Charles Lindbergh. This guy is going all over the world. He comes back from South America and claims that he's got the skeleton to some fantastical bird, which we'll call the snipe, that'll come back in later. When he tries to present this, the world makes fun of him, says, "Nuh-uh, no, you didn't." And he goes back to South America and he's looking for this bird. Meanwhile, we see a young Carl and his wife, Ellie. They meet each other as these fans of this Muntz character. They're children, and they look up to this world explorer. They want to be just like him, and they create a little adventures club, and that's how they meet. And then the movie starts going through quickly and showing that Carl and Ellie get married. They try and have a kid. She can't have a kid for some reason that makes her cry. So then they start saving their money up to go to South America and see where this Muntz guy was going. They want to move their house onto this place called, I think it was Pleasure Falls, or Paradise Falls, one of those two. And unfortunately, by the time they save up enough money to get these tickets, they're super old. Carl goes to throw a picnic to surprise Ellie with this ticket that they're now finally going to this place. And she collapses on the way up a hill to get to the picnic. And then we see that she's in the hospital. And then we see Carl is by himself inside a church. Ellie is now dead. This all happens within like the first 11 minutes of this movie. This kind of sours him on life. So he turns into this crotchety old man that's living in this house that he wanted to move to South America Ellie with. And then it zooms out, and it's one of these little houses amongst this huge development project that he's clearly a holdout. And you've probably seen internet articles or, news stories where a big golf course or a big mall or a big something is being planned. and there's one person that refuses to sell their house. So the entire development has to kind of be built around this house, and the house sticks out like a little wart. That is what Carl turns his house into until he ends up getting angry like an old man should, hits somebody in the head with his walker, draws blood, gets arrested, basically, or at least summoned to court. They find him a public menace. They tell him that he now has to move into assisted living because he is a public menace. And overnight, he attaches balloons to his house, which just straight up rips it out of the ground. And he uses this to float all the way to South America. On his way there, he realizes a young Boy Scout who originally just wanted to walk him across the street to get an I helped old person merit badge. He was looking under his porch for this mythical bird called a snipe. And when the house lifted up into the air, I guess this kid was trapped and ends up crawling up on the porch. So now poor Russell, this little Asian kid, is along for the ride. Technically, he's been kidnapped, I think. I'm not sure exactly where the law is on this, but Carl ends up moving with this kid to South America until they land, and they land right in this spot that he wanted to bring Ellie to. And they end up meeting Muntz, the guy that has been around since they were tiny little kids. He's still there, still looking for this bird. He becomes the ultimate villain of the story. They find this snipe bird, and Muntz sicks all of his dogs and tries to attack them. He even fires a shotgun at a child. He shoots at Russell as they're running into the house to kind of hide from him. They end up killing Muntz by pushing him off of a cliff, and happily ever after. I think that's pretty much the main strokes.
Adding murder to his rap sheet, but it's in another country, so what? It didn't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you push someone off a waterfall in South America and there's no one around to see it, do you go to jail? I guess that's the new Zen sort of way.
Make it splash,
right? And he unequivocally dies. Right? There's no way that Muntz is surviving this fall. They don't even imply that he landed in water or anything.
My note is Muntz just fell to a very gory death.
So that's okay, though, because he's been eating dogs.
Right. Well, that's why he's perfectly happy to shoot at Russell. He's completely disconnected from reality at this point. He's been living with dogs for, 50 years now? Talking dogs. That's gotta mess your brain up.
So really, that is up, in case you needed a refresher. Old guy floats his house into the air, moves it to South America, and ends up just wanting to go on this one final adventure. Like I mentioned earlier, there is a fan theory that right after he assaults this poor guy on the street and hits him in the head with his walker, the guy falls down bleeding. The police show up. All this actually happens again in the first 11 minutes of this movie. Then he just dies. He either dies that night, or maybe he dies in jail, or who knows what happens. Maybe he just got pepper sprayed and becomes delirious, and this is all sort of like a pepper spray fever dream. But either way, and I guess that's what you're talking about, is that the very beginning of this movie is very nostalgic, and then it immediately shows you this couple growing old, and one of them dies before they're able to achieve their dream. Very emotionally manipulative. They even hit the piano notes at the right spot. They slow the tempo down. They leave a lot of silence right as you're watching this guy realize that, his life is drastically changed. And then we meet a bunch of talking dogs, and the movie turns into kind of an adventure story where they're running through the jungle, trying to escape from this, the Jumanji guy that's basically after them with a big musket.
Well, the basic wiki one is comedy, drama, adventure film, which that's 3 of the quadrants, I guess. We just didn't get They did try to appeal to the kids. That's why we have the talking dog. This did have a little bit of a trail of extra stuff. Weirdly, there was a streaming series 2 years ago. Took them a while to get to that, which also includes Carl's first date after Ellie dies. This called Carl's Date. Doug Days. Okay, that's the name of it. DUG.
That's interesting. I'm actually intrigued. I might look those up.
Yeah, I didn't know about them until I was, doing my research and stuff for this. Theme park presence is almost nil. Russell and Doug are meet and greet characters. Kevin, meet and greet Animal Kingdom. And Carl used to be on this way. Carl is a retired meet and greet character. So they realized nobody wanted to meet Carl.
They could have a twist on Soren, where Soren starts out, and before you get on the ride, you have to assault somebody, and then you go to a funeral, and then the ride starts.
That'd be fun, yeah. And then you're doing the balloon thing. I can go with that. Have you been on the Soren with the Eiffel Tower?
No, I haven't been on Soren in 10 plus years at this point.
That's the newer one, which I kind of like the older one because they it's all footage, whereas the new one has a bunch of CG stuff. But yeah, if you're not dead center, then when you get to the Eiffel Tower, it's always warped and bent on that ride, which is kind of funny.
That's kind of the experience, because I've been on almost every Disney ride multiple times, at least the old versions of all these. And there's another one in Epcot that basically just projects 3D visions as you're going through. It's standing. It's not a cool sitting one like Soren. And there's also a Viking one, I believe, like a Norwegian ride in a boat that does something very similar. And once you've ridden it from like every different seating position, you get to see all of the weird, projector anomalies and sort of cracks in the mold.
They've changed the Norwegian one to Frozen, for better or for worse. It is. I love the original weird one with trolls. I haven't been.
I love that one. Yeah, that's kind of sad to hear. This was an Epcot, I believe.
That's right. Yeah, because in the late '80s when I was a kid, that was that was the only exciting part of the World Showcase. It's like, hey, that and the Mexico boat ride, which I believe that's the official name, Mexico boat ride. But yeah,
which is really just a Mexican restaurant with a ride attached to it.
Right. Just like Caspanita, yeah. But yeah, when you can't go drinking around the world and you're 8 years old, the World Showcase is far less appealing. I want to go back to Future World.
So understandable that Up does not get a ride. It does sort of stand out a little bit as an anomaly in this case.
Yeah. Well, what would be the worst movie for a ride? My Dinner with Andre? That would be a pretty rough ride.
Turns out, ironically, it was Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking of one that just like is maniacally nonsensical. There we go. That's a good Powder. Yeah, the Powder ride.
You just get felt up by a Disney exec, and that's the ride.
That's horrible. Let's see. Although we're talking about the theme parks, and I guess maybe it's a zoo, but it does make, Carl's retired, so he gets to retire, which I guess we don't get to do anymore. He's in a reasonably okay house. Him and his wife worked either at the zoo or at a theme park, right? He's selling balloons his entire life. He's actually made a career selling balloons, which feels unlikely because he's doing.
Yeah, what's the retirement package for that look like?
Yeah, I guess the zoo, because it seems she's like a tour guide or something. You don't quite see what Ellie does, but yeah. But they get to retire.
Might be a dark backstory there. What exactly was Ellie doing?
Yeah, she's making meth. She's cooking meth. She's a master chef at it.
She was Walter White.
Yeah, she was Walter White. That's what I'm getting at. That's why she's dead at the end.
She was the one who knocks.
She was too methed out to have children. That's what the doctor told her. You're too methed out for kids. Sorry.
The doctor said that you have to make a choice. It's either meth or pregnancy, and that's why she was sad, and she made her choice. It was meth.
What are the other really like geriatric movies? There's Cocoon came to mind. I was like,
dude, Cocoon is Lost Boys, but old people. I swear to you, it would take too long to explain all of it. There's even a scene that you can play at the same time where they say the same thing. I think it's Kiefer Sutherland and God, who's the diabetes guy? I already said Walter Matthau. So yeah, but who's the diabetes guy?
Is it? Oh, geez, Winford.
Wilford Brimley.
Yeah, we came
a clip of Cocoon with Wilford Brimley talking to his grandson, and then a clip of Kiefer Sutherland as a vampire, and overlay them. And even as they say the words, they both basically say at the same time, "We'll never get old and we'll never die." That is the entire sort of dynamic of both of those movies. So ever since I saw that, and I don't know what it was that I ended up seeing Lost Boys and Cocoon in the same day at some point. And I just realized these are the same freaking movie.
I haven't seen either of those for 30 years. But yeah. Hey, you want to guess how old Brimley was when he did Cocoon?
I think he was like 49 or something.
Yeah, 51.
Yeah, man.
It's the thing where he's like there he's like 47 or something. It's insane. Yeah,
He's a good Carl too, right?
Oh yeah. I think was he already dead by this point? No, 2020. They could have gotten him. Okay. It doesn't look like he did much voice acting. Brimley was known for playing characters at times much older than his age. Okay, that makes sense. If Quaker Oats is making you their face person,
I swear he was in a movie called The Man from Earth too, which is a very long movie that takes place in one room. It's like 2 hours in one room about someone that claims to be a historical version of Jesus Christ. And that he's
spent 2 hours in one room just in reality.
Except for when we record this show.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, I'm in my sphere of whatever, but usually, yeah, I got to take a walk or something, right?
There is another kind of interesting tangent that introduces right away. So mention in the first 10 minutes that and they do this big switcheroo and then it becomes talking dogs and running through the jungle. But in the first 10 minutes, the focus on this Muntz guy and how he brings back the skeleton of this unknown animal, and the science world laughs at him for this. They think that he's a fraud, that he just assembled a bunch of random bones and put them together. And this does make sense because it's sort of a nod to the Bone Wars, which happened in the late 19th century. I think it was two guys in particular, Cope and Marsh, and they were neck and neck who can discover the most dinosaurs, and they would sabotage each other and spy on each other. And in some cases, little haphazardly, just assemble bones together and be like, it's a brontosaurus. And then realize that, no, that actually doesn't exist. You took the bones from different creatures and assembled them. You're basically not following the instructions that came with the Lego box. You're just doing your own thing. And that, I think that's what they're talking about Muntz. When Muntz comes back and everyone laughs at him for assembling this weird hybrid animal and they don't believe him that it's real, this is an allusion to those Bone Wars. And if you were growing up as a kid in the 1930s, this does seem like it would still be somewhat noteworthy. You would probably know about this Bone Wars dynamic. And to this day, a lot of conspiracy theorists that I know well, they reference those Bone Wars, this thing that sent Muntz to turn into a supervillain in South America. They still cite those Bone Wars as the reason that they don't believe in dinosaurs now in 2025.
You got to not believe in anything, man. No, I was just sitting there thinking about like having a Prestige style movie with those guys. You can call it Boners or something. Yeah.
There's other funny things about that particular Bone Wars too, that these guys were in such a heated competition with each other that Edward Drinker Cope, he was one of, which is awesome. If your name is Drinker Cope, what a great name.
I was sitting there still thinking about it after you said it.
Edward Drinker Cope, he challenges Othniel Charles Marsh, that was his rival, that when they die to have their brains weighed, and whoever's brain weighs the most, whoever's brain is heavier is the smarter person and therefore the superior paleontologist. I love the logic behind this. There's such a phrenological, I think that's a word, phrenological reasoning behind this, right? Like if my brain weighs more than yours, then I'm clearly smarter. I don't know if that equals out, but here's a fun little tangent side note on that. Walt Whitman decided that he was going to get in on this too. The famous poet, right? Speaking of Walter White and Breaking Bad, but Walt Whitman's like, hey, I'll have my brain weighed. And when they went to weigh his brain, somebody slipped and dropped it on the ground and they weren't able to weigh it. So
now you got a Whitman sampler.
Don't you dare.
Okay, sorry, that I used all my brain power to say that. So where are we going next?
This is the first Disney movie in recent history. I don't know when we can put an exact date on this, but it's the first movie in which people exist yet are not the bad guy right away. And if you go by volume, dogs are the bad guy in this movie. I think if you go pound for pound, dogs are the villain, and then Muntz is sort of at the top of the chain of these dogs, but they are bloodthirsty Dobermans, and they're nasty. In fact, they're so mean to Doug that Doug immediately abandons his previous master and likens up to Carl to become his new master. So it stood out to me because it broke the Disney proxy a little bit. Here you've got an old person losing his partner, and you sort of trauma bond to Carl in that way. And then Carl inadvertently kidnaps a kid, but Carl ends up being a better dad to the kid than the kid's own dad is. And yet none of this was done to sell you a Happy Meal toy of Carl, right? So in that way, it sort of changes the whole Disney proxy. And another part of that, again, is that we've seen this trend that humans are the ultimate bad guy. It's always humans against nature, humans trying to destroy nature. In this movie, you kind of have that same motif in that Muntz has gone so sick with ridicule, and he's been searching for this damn bird for his entire life at this point, right? Like 50 years of searching for this snipe bird, and now he's bloodthirsty for it, and nothing can stop in his way. So in that way, I guess we still see a human against nature, and the human is the bad guy. But it's not that like humans in general are destroying the planet and humans are destroying the magic of animals. If anything, the bad guy made animals more magical because he gave them the ability to talk through technology, even though he's the bad guy. It's so weird. It's so fascinating how many different twists and turns that Pixar was able to do with this movie.
Yeah, I guess their only thing is they put all the cute chips on Doug, which, I mean, it didn't fail, but it's not like Doug is like an iconic character or something, which I'm sure somebody was hoping for that.
He's probably the most iconic character that you could sell a Happy Meal toy of.
That's what I'm getting at. I don't know. I mean, some of us would be amused by a Carl toy, which like it said, he was a meet and greet for a little while. So somebody thought, yeah, it was a good idea.
Ed Asner's just roasting kids as they come into the park.
That'd be great. I'd love that.
Also, a side note, in that first 11 minutes or so, Muntz being this big explorer and the kids meeting, Carl and Ellie meeting and becoming in this adventurers club, this is a nod to a very real thing. In fact, there were 4 or 5 of these groups. The most famous of them was called the Explorers Club. And it literally was rich, aristocracy, British Americans that were so bored and had so much money that they just created a club where they travel the world and they collect artifacts. And South Park sort of does a little bit of a parody on this as well. That gets a little bit dark.
We've talked about Sea before. Disney has their own, the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, right?
So this is the real version of that from the 1930s or so.
Yeah, and Downtown Disney or whatever had their Adventurers Club. I think maybe it's closing around this time, but yeah, they had it, right? And so
no, I'm not throwing any unnecessary shade on Up as a movie because I actually do think it breaks the mold and it's a great movie. But clearly, Carl is in the Adventurers Club or the Explorers Club. And he does objectively kidnap a child and traffic him across country lines into South America. I'm just going to leave it there. But the plot points exist, even if the connective tissue isn't really in this movie. If you were to just spell those out in the court of law, first you assaulted a man and drew blood, and then what happened?
Yeah, I mean, there is intent, which again in a court's going to get all muddy and bad. From a narrative perspective, we don't give him intent, but in real life, you don't know. And
there's, as far as I can tell, there's no consequence for Carl at this point. After he evades a court order, kidnaps a child, goes to South America, and then he's able to just live life afterwards, no repercussions. So if there is an Aesop fable in here, it's probably not a great one.
How do they get home?
They take Muntz's aircraft back home. They take his big Zeppelin because when he left to go to South America, he brought it with him. So they're able to just drive like a nice, steerable Zeppelin back home.
Right. Okay. No, I was just checking because I didn't quite, reunite. returning home once his airship. Yeah, I just didn't quite remember. That's the end of the movie, right? You're kind of, I guess, tapping out by that point. I was like, I think I might have missed something because I was like, well, I just watched The Dark Knight Rises, where Batman inexplicably gets from like somewhere in the Middle East back to Gotham City because he's Batman, but they don't show any of that, right? So
you would miss it if you weren't paying really close attention because it happens in the last 4 or 5 minutes of the movie. They're all of a sudden they're just home, and then as they zoom out, you can see the Spirit of Adventure, that big Zeppelin. You can kind of see it behind them.
Okay, it's a little more inferred. Okay, well that didn't work quite as well as Russell's family life getting inferred to me.
Have you? This will be the quickest tangent ever. Have you ever heard of a TV show called The Detectorists?
No.
It's about it is one of the slowest TV shows I've ever seen in my life. For some reason, I was able to sit through it. But anyways, it's about these two guys that just are obsessed with metal detectors. They got normal lives. They got other stuff going on, but they meet up on weekends and they just go hunting for weird metal relics and they compare stuff. And it turns into a mad dash to find ancient treasure and, buried treasure and Roman coins and items from battle. It's out, I think, somewhere in the UK. Anyways, the very end of this show, I think it made it to 2 seasons, which is a weird miracle, but it wraps up right in the last, I want to say 4 to 5 seconds of this 2 seasons. In the last 4 seconds of the last episode of season 2, as the credits are rolling, as the camera is zooming all the way out for an aerial shot, it gives the most fulfilling reward. But it's sort of like that. If you saw the credits scrolling and you just flip off to another channel or you walk away or you stop paying attention, you miss one of the most fulfilling endings of any show ever, and it's kind of in a similar way as Up doesn't really give you any fulfillment because you see this Spirit of Adventure. It just explains how they got there, but it's an example that in those last crucial 10 seconds of a movie, sometimes they give you the biggest answer of all.
From Russell's perspective, do you think getting a bottle cap as a merit badge is underwhelming? I mean, it's greatly emotional for Carl, but 10-year-old boy, and he's not that emotionally. Russell's not that smart.
I don't know. I think we could debate on that. I think Russell's plenty smart. Compared to the body size to mental acuity ratio that we're used to in Disney films, he is probably the fattest smart kid, or the smartest fat kid. Either way that you want to say that, I would argue that Russell is the smartest fat kid that we've seen.
Well, he's lacking in some emotional intelligence, at least.
Okay, well, maybe he's autistic. That's fine.
Yeah.
I think that he could be impressed with the little grape thing. But again, if this is a story about Carl being dead, then him getting any merit badge at the end was really symbolic of the angel getting his wings for helping an old person transition from one state to the other.
Right. Well, he was there to help him cross, right? Cross something. That he says it directly.
right as he gives him that the grape bottle merit badge, he should just say, "There you go, you've been graped."
Yeah, end your movie with a terrible pun. That's always a good way to do it. You say graped or just you've been grape?
You've been graped.
Okay. That's I feel like you've been grape is worse, but okay. We're looking for worse in this case, right?
So yeah, I guess going into some of the dark details. Why does Carl have so many locks on his door? There's something.
Big city. He's paranoid.
Maybe, or are those locks to keep people in or keep people out? I don't know. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, maybe he's kind of an H.H. Holmes sort of guy.
Carl's got some stuff going on. Yeah, the camera purposefully does not show what's under the house as it flies into the air. If it showed you like the footprint, it would just be John Wayne Gacy's basement, essentially.
Clown paintings? I mean,
yeah, clown paintings and letters to Maureen Reagan, right? Wasn't that one of them?
Yeah. I guess if you want to hit a few more of your notes there.
Yeah, so before we even got into this whole synopsis aspect of it, one of the interesting parts is that they are going into a storm. This is so weird because we were talking about the closed captions, and then I was about to make this point. I was like, hold on, let's get into the synopsis. Now that we know what the movie's all about, the closed caption, it was just interesting, and it shows you that watching movies with closed captions on sometimes gives you this weird extra insight to where with the closed captions, right after Carl disconnects from the material realm and starts floating out into the sky, he's got his back turned, and you can see behind him the clouds start to get really dark, and then it starts raining, and then there's lightning, and Russell's in the background jumping up and down, and he's trying to get Carl's attention. If you've got closed captions on, you can hear every single thing that Russell is saying, even though it's not audible, because in the movie, Carl turns his hearing aid off. So now you're kind of hearing what Carl's hearing, which is nothing. But the closed captions, they literally tell him that, hey, we're about to go into a storm. Hey, we have to change course. Meaning that Russell is incredibly aware of how all this works. He's got a GPS. After Carl passes out because he spends all of his effort trying to tie down his material possessions. As they go through the storm, it's knocking pictures off the wall. It's knocking all these mementos off the shelf that remind him of Ellie. So he's spending all his time saving this stuff, and then it kind of fades to black and fades back up. And Russell tells us, hey, while you were passed out, I saved us, I steered us, I got us exactly where we needed to go. So I think this is a good segue into just proof that Russell is pretty smart, although in a fat kid slapstick way, when he goes to show off his GPS, he kind of like throws his arms open, and when he does this, he throws it out the window accidentally, and now they're kind of screwed without the GPS. So maybe this is Russell being a digital native savant, but he doesn't actually know how to interact with the real world because he doesn't know how to put a tent up. He's never actually camped outside before because, again, his dad and Phyllis, his new bitch girlfriend, won't let him.
Yeah, I guess it's because, I teach a bunch of kids, and you occasionally have the kid that's like, I'm the dumb kid, which I don't get that psychology where it's like, I want to be the dumb kid, which I'm wondering if that's kind of just how Russell acts in groups of other kids, because we don't see Russell interact with any other kids except that he's standing behind other scouts or next to other scouts at the end. That's it, right?
Again, if he's an angel, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, he wouldn't need to interact with any of those folks. True.
He's just missing the flaming sword.
Once we start seeing the dogs, I did notice, since we have had Monsters Inc. now, and something else in Ratatouille, I was noting they did not bother animating the dog's fur in this, probably because they didn't need to. Maybe it helps them look a little more cartoonish to make the film look a little more kid-friendly. I don't know.
Well, I think that we've been mentioning this too, that as the 3D quality is going up, the less it seems that they're trying to make it look real. They've got the realistic light physics going. They've got all of the materials looking good. So now they can turn the characters into caricatures and have it in this realism style and focus a lot more on sort of traditional animation process, right? Kind of like nods to what you would normally see in cinema, and not just 3D animation. The novelty has worn off, and now we get to see like a more mature implementation of this. And I think that's just another part of it, is they no longer have to animate every strand of hair because they're going for a different aesthetic, like an intentional aesthetic.
I guess it helps Disney proper crack the code for the 2010s as well, because that's kind of where they do figure out how to do their thing in a digital format, which, as we saw from the past few movies, they were fumbling around quite a bit.
I think also in this particular movie, it helps Kevin stand out. And let me just let me explain who Kevin is in case you forgot or you haven't seen this before. Kevin is the name of the bird that Muntz has actually been searching for his entire life. And when Carl and Russell land in South America, they immediately find Kevin, but Kevin is actually a female bird, and Kevin just had a whole bunch of baby birds. And I think that not animating the dog fur or anyone else's hair lets the animation of Kevin's feathers really stand apart. Now all of a sudden it's almost this majestic, ethereal look that has more light and more sheen. Everything else is kind of dull. Everything else absorbs light, and it's almost matte in this movie, except Kevin, who is super shiny.
Yeah, I guess that's a good example of, not using every tool you have in the toolbox.
Except in one place so that it stands on its own. Yeah, that's a great point. You don't have to use how would Pocahontas say all the colors of the wind? You don't have to use all the colors of the wind.
It's probably best just to select a few colors and use those. I guess we should talk about the cone of shame. That's one of the more memorable things out of this movie,
I love that. And one of my first notes on the cone of shame, which I think is a fascinating topic to get into, is that it is a direct inversion of a dunce cap. And I can't remember when the dunce cap came up before, but the origin of the dunce cap is that it was used to mock somebody that originally created the dunce cap. And to simplify it, it's like an antenna for consciousness, that if you are dumb or if you are spiritually poor, then by putting on a dunce cap allows you to tap into a literal higher consciousness, a flow of consciousness that is maybe a foot above where the top of your head is. And by putting a dunce cap on, you kind of tap into that Akashic record in a way, and you just become smarter from simply having this antenna on your head. A cone of shame is the exact opposite. A cone of shame would potentially invert a dunce cap and make you draw from your lower base, some like a lower consciousness. So putting a cone of shame on literally puts you into a lower form of consciousness. And if you've ever put a dog or a cat into a cone of shame, you can watch this happen in real time.
Okay, I have one other thought on the inversion. Yours does make more sense, but I was like, what if that just turns you into a transmitter now? So now Doug is transmitting his consciousness out into the ether.
I like that. Yeah, it would be sending it down, but it also makes sense because he becomes the alpha. So the whole scene with the cone of shame here is that when Carl and Russell land in, is it Paradise or Pleasure Falls? I'm gonna say I want to just.
I didn't give you the confirmation. Paradise.
It's Paradise Falls. So when they land in Paradise Falls, they run into Doug, and Doug immediately wants Carl to be his master, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you realize that Doug is the only German Shepherd out of all the other dogs there. It seems like the rest of them are bulldogs and Dobermans, and I'm going to assume something called a turnspit dog, and I'll get into that in a second. But those are the only dogs that they really have, except for this one dog, Doug, that is the German Shepherd. And I think that he represents the lowest form of the caste. He's the lowest dog on the totem pole out of all these other dogs, the opposite of the alpha, right? He's the most beta out of all the dogs on this Paradise Falls. However, as soon as he ends up putting the cone of shame on the alpha of this pack, all the other dogs in the pack look at Doug as if Doug is now the alpha, because the alpha put the cone of shame the beta put a cone of shame on the alpha, thereby making the alpha the beta and the beta the alpha.
Switch a few of the letters. Yeah, sure. So I guess that does make more sense that they receiver of bad vibes. But yeah, I was just thinking, when we say inversion, there's two ways to take it. So I wanted to consider the other way a little bit.
He also says, I think, sit, and all the dogs sit as soon as he puts the cone of shame on the alpha. So he does become a transmitter.
Where the voice itself doesn't matter, they still listen to the alpha when he sounds really stupid because his voice thing is malfunctioning.
Another thing too that goes unexplained, and they almost indicate the opposite of this, but the dogs, they're not bark. This isn't like the Homer Simpson's brothers invention where the dog barks and this little device translates the bark into human, right? In this one, it's almost like the dogs have Neuralink, and just by thinking thoughts produces this English speaking out of their collars, to the point where the dogs don't even bark at each other. They just think thoughts. The collar communicates those thoughts, but this almost implies that they could just telepathically talk to each other without even the use of the collars. Although that doesn't happen, because if the collar breaks, then you no longer have any communication with the rest of the dogs in your pack. And it also feels that the collar inhibits your ability to understand natural dog language. If you've been talking telepathically through these transcribing AI collars for 20 years, or I guess if they're dogs, we're talking like 7 years of your life, 10 years of your life. Then the second that collar is gone, can you just bark and the other dogs understand you? Or have you been so far removed from natural dog language that you can't talk to other dogs anymore without the assistance of AI?
For some reason, I'm thinking of the mutants in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, where they now speak telepathically to each other. But I think their excuse for still being able to communicate in English is that they have to sing to their God bomb sometimes. So they, still use language for that. So that gives an out. Who knows? Once Munce dies, give the dogs 20 years and they'll have the dog version of Beneath the Planet of the Apes going on.
They're all of those dogs are dead now. I'm sorry to say.
All of those dogs are dead. My dog is dead.
Good.
Where was I? Oh yeah, I guess we do need to consider the fact that Carl takes his house for a walk, which is I guess this is the real metaphor for he's carrying a lot of baggage, but
right, this is him still attached to the material realm, and the only way that he ends up being at one point, the balloons start to go off and the house is stuck. It's stationary, which means that Carl is stuck. And the only way he can get back up in the air again, the only way he can elevate is by removing physical items from his house. He starts throwing out chairs and tables and all sorts of things that originally he was really concerned about. Even the chair that he and Ellie would sit in and talk to each other, they just get thrown out of the door so that the house can elevate again. Although I want to note that we don't see him throwing out any licensed Disney goods. So you have to assume that he's keeping all of his trademark and licensed Disney stuff like that.
He's got a special room for that.
Yeah, you can bring that to the next plane of consciousness. I think Disney made sure of that.
That's right. Is Paradise Falls purgatory then? Is that how we should look at it?
Well, he does say immediately to Russell once they land, no rap music or flash dancing. So I would say if there's no flash dance, maybe no rap music, that's fine. No flash dancing, that sounds like purgatory leaning on hell.
Okay. Let's see. It's hard not to think. We've been looking at so many Miyazaki's. We're looking at one next week, and this does feel like a Pixar that has a little more Miyazaki in it. Because if we are looking at this as Carl getting out of this purgatory realm, that's a little bit like Spirited Away. We just, Howl's Moving Castle has the giant moving house. Here we have the floating house. This, I'm not saying they're like copying it, but it just seems a little more influenced by some of the Ghibli stuff than other Disney movies.
Yeah, and it aims at a slightly older demographic, I think also in some of those ways.
Yeah, I mean, looking through my trivia and stuff, it does not look like there's any direct connection or anything. So that is just me, like, because I do remember when the movie came out and being like, hey, didn't Howl's Moving Castle just came out? Is this a remake of that? That kind of was my first thought when I saw it, thinking it was like the American version or something.
Okay, so Howl's Moving Castle, Gran Torino, and Up. We put those into an AI blender.
Yeah, put that into the AI blender for sure. And then you should replace Ed Asner with and Clint Eastwood with apparently Spencer Tracy, because they were trying to make Carl look kind of like Spencer Tracy and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. that because that was his last movie. Yeah.
There are two different quotes in this movie that were notable to me. Three, if we count Squirrel. Squirrel's a pretty good one. I still say that now, even years after I saw this movie. That's a really good one. The other one is when Russell is talking about when he used to get to spend time with his dad before Phyllis, that homewrecker, took him away. But he was talking about how they used to just sit around and play red car, blue car, which is when you just sit on the side of a street, I guess, and yell out red car. And then you wait for the next person to see a blue car and yell that out, versus all the other cool stuff they might have done. And Russell says, the boring stuff is the stuff I remember the most. I just thought that was also emotionally manipulative in a way, but also kind of a really good quote. The other one, which is still haunting me to this exact moment, was when Muntz, the explorer, who has this huge army of dogs that he keeps breeding, right? It's like the three same types of dog, but just many, many of them, aside from Doug the golden retriever, which stands on his own. I guess once Doug dies, there's no more Dougs. But all these other dogs, he's got an army of these dogs, and he says at one point, "I've lost so many dogs," and he kind of has his hand in his face as he says this, and I'm just wondering, like, what exactly does that mean? Because we do see dogs running off a cliff, Milo and Otis style, right? And dogs also die in this movie. He's referencing that every time he tries to go into this cave to capture this snipe bird, that this is where he also loses a bunch of dogs. But I was getting to thinking, what is he eating out here? We don't come across any other animals, right? When we're isolated in this remote area. The only animals are a bird that he has not been able to find in 50 years and a huge army of dogs. Those are the only animals that we see the entire time.
Bugs.
But that would be very Disney. Although, why does he need so many dogs? And he's clearly breeding them, right? So that he has essentially an unlimited supply of dogs.
He needs a hobby.
When they go to have dinner at Muntz's in his big Zeppelin, he even has the dogs serving him food. And this set me down the weirdest of rabbit holes. But I was wondering, can you train dogs to serve food? Is this even a real thing? Because I figured that there's some smart dogs out there. They can tell you if you're about to have a stroke, right? If you're about to have like a diabetic collapse, they can kind of smell the sugar emanating off of you and go and open a door and bring you a phone or something. Anyways, dogs can't serve food. Dogs can be food. We'll leave that to another episode. But there was also a specific breed of dog called a turnspit dog that would work in a kitchen, and they would just be used to literally turn the spit. So if you were cooking, beef or chicken or a rotisserie of some kind, the best way to do it, they originally had kids doing this work, but kids will complain about blisters on their hands, and at a certain point, maybe you feel bad for them. They didn't feel bad about throwing a dog in a hamster wheel suspended in the air on the wall and then throwing a hot burning coal in there once in a while just to keep this dog running and turning the spit. So I'm saying that he probably had a turnspit dog somewhere in there, and that he saw dogs kind of like turnspit dogs as these expendable utilities that you use in a very utilitarian way and not as man's best friend or companion, which makes Muntz kind of that Disney classic separated from nature bad guy.
You see the dog thing actually a year ago in the movie Wonka, because they have the guard dog, which they reappropriate to do the work that they're being basically kept in slavery or indentured servitude for. So you get the dog to do the work, and he's running in like a hamster wheel or something. It was just kind of interesting that is in a relatively recent movie as well.
This was cited, I think, Benjamin Franklin referenced turnspit dogs, and in fact, they only became banned in the late 1800s. And it was one of the main things cited for the foundation of the SPCA were these turnspit dogs. Mm-hmm. So anyways, in case that's new to you, like it was to me, I found that absolutely fascinating that for the longest time, and that turnspit dogs, you would have to cut their tails off so that it wouldn't get burnt by the ember that you would throw into this hamster wheel to keep them running, but also so it wouldn't get trapped in the spokes of this wheel. And which led to that phrase of curtailing, and that a curtailed dog would usually indicate a dog owned by peasants or a dog that was assigned to some sort of a mundane task versus dogs that were allowed to keep their tails. And those were the ones that were essentially owned by aristocracy and, the upper classes. So anyways, I thought that was a fun little tangent.
You got deeper there than I did. My only note around there is that they once had the perfect line. They didn't give it to him. Bitches attack. That should have been the movie. Also, I did think after Carl said no rap music, the next scene should have had rap on the soundtrack.
Honestly, that would have been a perfect needle drop. It goes right into Public Enemy.
That said, I'm very glad that they're not needle dropping at this point. So I do feel like not needle dropping in animation is way classier.
Right, and I think that it was a crutch too in those early days when someone realized that maybe the animation wasn't up to snuff. a needle drop feels like a decent solution to sort of distract. It's like, hey, look over here, kids. It's kind of the distraction while you're setting up the magic trick. And since they've advanced far enough, both in storytelling and in the visuals, that they didn't necessarily have to resort to the needle drop. I guarantee you that there was a meeting on Disney property at some point where they were suggesting needle drops, and someone had to shoot that down.
DreamWorks loves needle drops, and they're the enemy. Maybe that's why. I think they still do.
I like that. I like those being two lines of the same war.
Yeah. Speaking of DreamWorks a bit, I just wrote a note that Carl and Ellie in their explorer suits in the beginning, they look an awful lot like Minions. Even though this is a few years before we get the first Minions movie, I was just like, they look like Minions in the first couple scenes. I think they're even like wearing like yellow and blue. So I thought that was interesting.
The last note I have on here is that the ending of this movie, I think, is phenomenal. I think that for two reasons. One is the actual ending. It has, and that's why I brought up the Detectorists. The Detectorists immediately came to mind as, man, what a great way to end all of this, to kind of wrap it up. And as the movie's ending and it zooms out, it shows that the house that Carl left behind, because he took the Zeppelin back to the States, right? He leaves the house behind that he was going to move with Ellie. The silhouette of this house on top of Paradise Falls is almost identical to a painting that was in the house that he created, or at least hung when Ellie was there, that showed that house in Paradise Falls in that spot. So it was a nice little homage to the house made it, so he kind of fulfilled this promise to Ellie, where they even said, cross your heart, ... hope to die, stick a needle in your eye. But even after they crossed their heart, he made good on this promise. And that's the last visual you see. And then the movie goes into this final montage of a memory book. They're going through a scrapbook with all these photos. And then after that ends, the scrapbook aesthetic stays on the screen, and then the credits scroll. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because usually when they give the credits some sort of a visual treatment like this, it goes for the top billing. And then once you get into the very, very end of the credits, now you just get like a regular old white text on black background or some sort of like a gradient. But they kept it up. They kept up that aesthetic for the entire credit scroll. And I just thought that was such a nice touch. I know it sounds like a very minor, the graphics of the credit screen, but I find that they put a lot more heart and soul into this than, for example, a money grab. This movie, I guess, more so than any other Disney movie we've seen so far, feels like they're doing a reverse psychology where they're like, we're not doing a money grab. We're not doing a money grab. Number 6 movie this year. Yeah, right.
But that's why it's important to note this is that little out in the wilderness period for Pixar, where they were like not quite sure what the next step was. So maybe that's where it's just like we have to make a distinctive Pixar vibe so we can distinguish ourselves if we need to, which didn't work. I mean, I see a movie coming out from the Walt Disney Company. I don't know if it's a Pixar or just a regular Disney, it's at this point in time, it's very easy to tell, but not now. One other thing, just marketing history that I remember is I do remember buying this on Blu-ray before I got a Blu-ray player, because this was the first one where they packaged it with the DVD. And I was planning to buy a Blu-ray player. So I was like, okay, I'll get the package. I'll get them together, and it seemed like a really good deal at the time. Now I guess that's normal if you buy physical media, but.
Well, it's not normal to get a DVD with your Blu-ray. No.
No?
I don't think so. I've never heard of that before, that you buy a Blu-ray and you get a DVD included.
I've got a ton of combos. Okay, anyway, for one reason, that's one of the first things I think of with this movie, so I have to spit it out somewhere in the podcast. Like, hey, that's the first time I bought a combo.
That means you've had access to that extra story that breaks down Russell and Phyllis.
I might have watched it 15 years ago, for all I know.
It's called Russell Wilderness Explorer. That's the name of this little mini documentary that comes on the disc.
Yeah, I've kind of I'm not a big special features guy. I mean, I do remember when DVDs were new, like you'd want to get the ones with the real great special features, but then you rarely had time to watch them. So,
what about riff tracks?
I guess podcasts about movies so much, I've kind of chilled out on the whole Mystery Science Theater vibe in general. Like if I want to make my own jokes watching a movie with someone. I want to be the guy, right? I don't want someone else writing the jokes.
Fair point. I think they also had a little bit more edge when it was movies you never would have seen otherwise.
That might have helped.
The movies were so bad that having someone provide a comedic overlay to that made the movie good and therefore transformed it, versus watching a riff tracks of, say, Harry Potter, Star Wars, or The Room. Maybe The Room's a bad example, but like of a good movie, it sort of competes with it as opposed to adding to it and transforming it.
Yeah, I guess this podcast started where I was doing a podcast looking at a bunch of like caught in ephemeral films, right? So for me, I'd want to see that stuff without the commentary, I guess. But when I was a teenager, yes, I watched a ton of Mystery Science Theater. I went to go see the Mystery Science Theater theatrical movie, like, you know, on opening day and stuff. So I have definitely enjoyed that stuff in the past. But yeah, once riff tracks came along, I think that's where I was getting to the point. I want to sit in the room with friends and talk smack about this stuff, you know? I did a couple riff tracks. I do remember doing that. So, okay. I guess we'll start wrapping up for today then. You said you were on your last note. I think I've gotten through everything I wanted to say. So
yeah, what's next up?
Next up, we're actually heading back for Miyazaki and doing a bit of Ponyo, which was released in 2009 in America by the Walt Disney Company. So it is not anime annuary stuff. It is a proper Disney release, kind of, sort of, well, distribution release.
I've never seen that one, so this will be new for me.
It's their kind of their version of The Little Mermaid in like a confusing way, if I remember. I've seen it once. That'll be interesting because that is probably the Ghibli most geared towards children. Whereas Up, like you said, is the Pixar most geared towards adults. So it's kind of like Ghibli doing the opposite. So that'll be interesting contrast next week. As far as what's going on your end, there's lots of things I know.
Well, see, I put these out a little bit later than you do, so it's always hard to time out exactly what to be doing. But in the real world, in the current time space continuum that I personally exist in, I'm about to do my 100th episode of my Paranoid American podcast, which will have a 6-hour live stream. Again, if you're listening to this on my channel, and this already occurred, sorry, you missed out on it. If you're listening to this on Matt's version that he probably puts out, I think he usually releases on like a Monday. It'll be today. Like if you're listening to this, this airs, it's today. So go and
if you're listening to this, you may be listening to us only about 2 hours in the past, because I have time to crank this thing out now.
So yeah, come and hang out there. If you do miss that, then you'll be able to go ahead and find it on paranoidamerican.com or going on YouTube. And I also have just done 2 recent episodes of my Sound Science series, where I pull someone in, get them to talk about 5 influential albums in their life. One that we did recently was with Weston Cage. You might recognize him because he's not just the son of Nicolas Cage, but he has a whole bunch of really awesome metal albums that he's put out. And metal, I don't like to put categories on stuff. You should just go and search Wes Cage. We listened to his album Prehistoric Technology, along with Enya and Enigma. Basically, the Pure Mood soundtrack from the 90s were some of his most influential albums. So it was fun. We got to listen to Enya and Enigma and talk about it with Weston Cage. And then I just did another one recently with Shane Cashman of Timcast and a whole bunch of other shows that you've seen him on. And we did what he calls antagonistic music, which started with Pantera and went all the way into something called Cuddle Monster, which was new to me. But I love that series. If you like hearing about music and hearing music that you've maybe never heard before, and even some weird dark stories behind it, you should also check out Sound Science.
And then hasn't Baby Metal made some inroads into America? You know, Baby Metal.
I know what you're talking about, and it shouldn't.
Okay, that's the very kawaii girls doing like death metal or something. It's not something you would sit around and listen to. It's just kind of fun to see for a minute, you know, that kind of thing.
Like Jordy.
Watch a YouTube video or something. I do a bunch. That's you said it, and Trekkie. First thing I think is Jory LaForge.
Records youngest musician to ever go platinum.
Yes. Okay, there we go. Now I remember. Okay. No, I was like, why is he talking about Geordie LaForge from Star Trek, right?
Damn it, Wesley.
I don't do a Star Trek podcast because there's too many of those, but I do a lot of media podcasts at podcastios.org. That's where you'll get the early versions of these. Although if you want to watch my hair dry, you got to go to the YouTube. It's not drying today though, because time changed. Shower comes after the podcast now. Your time changed. My time didn't change. Y'all should get in line with Japan on time.
We don't have any say in the matter. I would love to get rid of it too.
Yeah. Anyway, what I do talk about is the Twilight Zone Time Enough podcast, highly and lowly rated movies by IMDb users on Films and Filth and something else. Oh, Planet of the Apes. I already mentioned the Planet of the Apes. That's on podcast 1999. Okay. Yeah. We'll get out of the sky. This week was the sky. Next week is the sea.
All American stickers, cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies, all the land and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers, they'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret societies, all of these and more on our sticker sheets.
Explore the unique with Paranoid American sticker sheets. Unearth tales of cryptids, cults, and mysteries through each sticker. These won't last long. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
We're all American stickers, cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies, all the land and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers, they'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret societies, all of these and more on our sticker sheets.
What the heck are you waiting for? Discover the extraordinary with Paranoid American sticker sheets. From cryptids in the night to cults out of sight, each sticker is a unique find. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlight your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hate maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, metas the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when a beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.